Hey, what's going on there, folks? Welcome back here to a Monday. I know it may not be the best day out here of the week, but hey, Friday is right around the corner here in a few days, so sit tight. It is May 20th, 2024, about 11:45 a.m. here, California time. Latest activity here on the Earthquake 3D globe still shows some movement into Southern California with a migrational swarm going on here, it looks like, across the area of Southern California. Now, we did see a 4.1 earthquake earlier this morning, about 5 o'clock or so, local time here, California, away from our swarming region. That in itself looks like it's starting up a little separate swarm as well, just off of the, it looks like it's on the San Jacinto fault zone, but just off of this area where we've seen hundreds of earthquakes here around the Brawley seismic zone. So let's take a look here at the last 7 days. I want to show you guys what's going on here and why I think it's just not confined here to one little area. You know, a lot of people think it may be associated with volcanic activity, which it's not. This is more or less a stress migration pattern out here, in specifically around the Southern California area. This swarming that kicked up here south of the border has been over, I think it's just been over the week period, so we're not able to see all the magnitudes. If we were to pull up the 30 days, then we scoot back a couple more days to where we can see that swarming that stirred up here, originally south, right? But I don't want to have it cluttered out here with 30 days of earthquake. So note this swarm here, south of the border, just off the Imperial Fault, and then in the last 7 days here, supposed to be the last 7 days. Not for sure why it jumped like that. That was weird. We noticed that swarming kick up here a couple days ago, further up north along the plate boundary, where we're at. Oh man, we're close to 300 earthquakes. If you look here on the map, 270 earthquakes. Some of those this morning as well. It does look like things are starting to stir back up. But now, you know, we got a separate area to watch with that 4-pointer stirring up further to the west, and a little bit of earthquake activity following that 4-pointer. So things are still quite heightened down here across this area. Not just a one little area, not just on one segment of a fault system or plate boundary. This is a migrational pattern that's been working its way up north, and it's stuck out here for now, and it's been stuck out here for 300 and something years, far as any release of strain out here along the plate boundary. Right, the San Andreas Fault here, the southern segment, has not seen a full rupture out here in over 300 years. And the magnitude that's being thrown around is an 8.1, far as the built-up accumulated strain that exists out here right now. So we got to watch that, because this movement today, this 4-pointer, along with some swarming going on in itself, is indicative here of regional strain up against the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. We've seen it migrate north, not south, not east, not west, but mainly north. It seems as though for now it's kind of dodged this area here, but we'll keep an eye on the Brawley seismic zone right about here, just north of Brawley, into the extensional fault, or into the plate boundary here, the San Andreas Fault, for some further movement today, because this is a little eye-opener right here when we see this much activity stirring up out here in the last week or so. And it's just a pattern that you can follow. All started off down south here, worked its way. There was a little separate swarm here that started, you know, in this area, and then worked its way up north here. So this has definitely been, you know, you can pretty much connect the dots out here. A little small swarming back here around the Salton Sea. Looks like they actually added some quakes in there, because I don't remember that earthquake movement happening there in the last couple days, or in the last week or so. So sometimes it takes these geologists, seismologists, to look at the graphs, see maybe some earthquakes that took place, and then add them days later. So there was, if you look here in the last week, there has actually been some type of migrational pattern even further north around the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault, which sleeps. If we wake that up, it's going to be a bad day for Southern California. There's going to be a lot of, you know, it's going to be a damaging earthquake. That's all I need to say. unlike what we've seen here in historic times. So watch the Southern California area with this new movement taking place here. Yes, Southern California gets earthquakes all the time. I'm tired of hearing that because it's a common response. This is normal. It's normal, everyone. Go back to bed or continue what you were doing. I'm not going to mention names, but that seems to be the wording that's thrown out here. But this isn't normal. This is a pattern that we've been recognizing here in a swarm fashion with really no main quakes here. If you look at this swarm of almost 300 earthquakes, there was no main quake. It all started off with a 1.3, a 2.1, 1.8, 1.1, 1.6. There's no main quake. I could understand if there was a 4-pointer and then it was followed up by a whole bunch of small little earthquakes, but that's not the case. The largest quake that we've seen in this sequence of earthquake swarms here is a 3.9, specifically in this area. So there's no main quake. That tells me right there that's regional stress and strain. And same for down here. There was no main quake. It was just all of a sudden a bunch of little earthquakes, some larger earthquakes in there. Not large, but, I can't remember exactly what we had down here. 2.8 started off with the 2.8, a couple other 2s and a 4, and then a couple 3s snuck in there. It's a pattern that, it needs to be watched here because there has been some earthquake migration up along the Brawley seismic zone, awfully close into the triggering zone. Now that's something that people use, right? Geologists and whatnot tell us that there's a triggering zone around a fault system or plate boundary that's well strained, well stressed, and that's overdue for a large earthquake. And some are throwing out a 2-mile zone or so. So if we get a big enough earthquake around here within about 2 miles, supposedly that's going to trigger the big one. But realistically, any type of swarming, strain, migrational stress pattern out here is indicative of obviously pressure, right? A lot of pressure up here against the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. And that in itself could trigger it. Don't necessarily have to have one earthquake within a mile or two of the fault to trigger it. I think just regional strain in itself can overload the already overloaded plate boundary out here known as the San Andreas Fault. So we'll keep an eye on that, folks. Definitely an interesting little pattern taking place here, how it kind of dodged off of this area. And, but there is still some that we've seen here in the last couple days that they've added on. We didn't see it before, but it looks like they went back, looked at all the data, went through all the numbers and whatnot, and came up with some earthquake activity that did take place here closer to the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. So watch that. That's a lot of earthquake activity here, folks, in the last 7 days. If you go 2.5 and above, that doesn't look as bad, right? This is the numbers that a lot of the social media sites and news agencies are throwing out. Yeah, there's been a swarm of 33 earthquakes there outside of El Centro in the last week. Well, I mean, that's when people get confused and, put out the claim that, 33 earthquakes is really nothing in the last week. They get hundreds of earthquakes each week. But that's not the case. That's not 33 earthquakes. It's about 272 earthquakes here in the last week when you add the all magnitudes. Earthquake is an earthquake, whether it's a 2.5 or a 2.4. It's still an earthquake. These are some big numbers, and we're watching it. Definitely keep an eye on Southern Cal today. Some further movement up north here. Northern California specifically, not all that active. It seems as though right now things are wanting to strain out here against this area of the state down south. Pacific Northwest, relatively quiet as well. Some further movement up here into Utah. This area has been a little swarming area here recently. I think has it been over 30 days? Close to it. I think there's been a little bit more than this. Right now, about 140 earthquakes up here in this area of Utah. A lot of nothingness going on out here in terms of, what this is out here. I was waiting for a reply here from the USGS. I don't know if they put out notification on this or not, but this has been an area of interest with earthquakes swarming here recently, and it's off. It doesn't look like it's on any main fault systems out here, so a little bit of swarming out there today as well. Yellowstone National Park. Looks like a handful of smaller quakes. Let me see what we got. Really nothing major going on here. Looks like we're starting to get some wind events stirring up here in the last hour or two. But as far as earthquake activity, a couple very small spikes. Those are extremely small, localized there to that area. Texas, seen some movement out in the oil fields. I hate to say it, but that's very typical out here. And we got one earthquake out in the New Madrid seismic zone. It looks like a 2.1 from yesterday. As far as broad scale activity goes across the world, let me check Hawaii first. Still seeing a little bit of movement out there across the Kilauea volcano. I'm going to go check the seismograph stations here real quick and see what we got. Check the deformation data, because things have been stationary, if not a little deflationary activity there across the summit region of Kilauea volcano here recently in the last couple days. The volcano is still not erupting. This was put out yesterday here, so they haven't put out a daily update yet. Data has come in as stationary right now in the last 24 hours, it looks like. This is the last 2 days. Overall trend, though, this is the last month of inflation. Inflation meaning magma accumulation underneath the area, creating this swelling. We should start to go up. Notice the pattern here. This last one was definitely a dandy of a one. It lasted for a little bit longer, went up a little bit higher as well on the chart. We should see this go up. And currently, we're at an elevated level. In fact, the highest level observed here since 2018, since the 2018 eruption, where it was off on the East Rift Zone. Created quite a bit of damage out there. So look at that. Going up and up and up. So past 5 years here around the summit area. We'll continue to watch that as well, right? It can only get so inflated before we see some type of magma intrusion or displacement there from the region. Our last displacement happened back in February of this year, where we were at a similar level of inflation there at the summit, and that just got moved way off here into the southwest rift zone and kind of followed it. We could follow the trail of earthquakes where the magma was heading. Looks like it was heading off towards the Loihi Seamount or underneath this area. But now we're inflated again. I guess we got to wait and see what happens here. See what the Kilauea volcano wants to do. Out and about here across this area of the world to see what we got. A couple earthquakes here from today, mostly from yesterday it looks like. We did see some further movement here around Guam. Did see a 4.5. This one's fairly deep. Now that deep earthquake comes after a super deep earthquake here yesterday up north. So this area definitely strained across the Mariana Trench and the Izu Trench here. Watch for some surface adjustment. I mean, you got two deep earthquakes here on both sides, or top and bottom here of the Philippine plate. This area right here in the red, this is where all the strain from the Pacific heads off and meets this area. And then the crunch zone over here on the western side of the Filipino plate and areas around the Indonesia Islands region, Japan, Kuril Kamchatka, is where all the plates tend to collide and create these subduction zones, volcanoes. A lot of stress out here in this area. So keep an eye upstream. Taiwan's seen a handful of smaller quakes here today, couple fours. No major swarming going on yet, but this area has been in a region of intense earthquake swarming here over the last month. Japan area quiet for now. Did have a 4.8 up here along the Kuril Kamchatka Trench near the Kuril Islands from yesterday. New Zealand area, Tonga, Samoa looks pretty quiet. That's the absent area today, it looks like, in terms of earthquake movement. Nothing showing up here on the map. A little strange, pretty quiet. There's the crunch zone out here, roughly Taiwan southward into the Philippines, Indonesia Islands area. South America, a handful of quakes as well. Really nothing major going on down there for now. And let's see what we got here across the Puerto Rico area. A lot of this from yesterday. Latest one shows a 3.1 here in the Puerto Rico region, about 22 kilometers deep. The Atlantic Ocean, aside from this one quake here from yesterday, looks pretty quiet across the board. Let's go check out Iceland, see what's going on up here up north. Get a little view of some earthquake activity. It looks like about 60 earthquakes in the last 12 hours. Still around the region south here. Some around the Grindavik area as well. The town, the community here. Today is Monday, so they should have an update put out. Let's see what we got from the Icelandic Met Office, which they haven't. I'm surprised. I'm guessing things haven't changed yet. I mean, there's really been no major earthquake activity, no major earthquake swarming. The earthquake that I showed you is just common on any given day, but we got to be getting close here. 16 million cubic meters of magma underneath the area. Things are quite inflated here underneath the region, so I'm able to put it out a little bit later today. I'll keep an eye on it, then we'll cover that later tonight in the update. Space weather activity, about steady as she goes here, except for some M-flare activity in the last couple days. Things are relatively stable down into the C-flare category. Consistent C-flare activity indicating, really not a whole lot going on. We do have a couple different sunspots that are currently facing the Earth, but relatively speaking in terms of magnetic structure, they are all relatively stable. I had my hopes up here with this sunspot when it was coming around the eastern limb here a few days ago, but it has taken a turn for the worse in terms of complexity. Doesn't look like that's going to be much at all. And really, the rest of these don't look all that impressive either, to be honest. It looks like we're entering into a little period here of quietness in terms of large solar flare activity. Now, we do have a fairly large sunspot on the far side of the sun. Let's make sure we got the most recent image. This is still from yesterday. They'll probably put it out a little bit later today, but you'll still be able to see it here. This is the far side, eastern limb right here, western limb of the sun on this side, and this is the earth-facing side of the sun. Look at that spot. That is a giant spot. This is a sunspot right here that produced all the X flares and all the CME activity here recently. It is now obviously way out there on the far side of the sun. We got this one right here that should be visible cresting out here in a week off on the eastern limb. We'll have to watch it because it does look like a very giant sunspot. And a little uncertain on the what we'll see as it comes around, but it does look quite impressive, at least from this visual of the far side. All right, Storm Prediction Center out here today. Goodness, seen a lot of tornado activity out there in Oklahoma and Kansas yesterday. That's drifted a little bit further north here for a Monday, enhanced risks across portions of Nebraska and Nebraska and northwestern Colorado here do have a 5% chance for tornado probability in these mentioned zones here, and some 2% surrounding that in the green. Wind and some large hail is the potential out there as well across that region. Tomorrow, looks like they're adding a moderate risk here, so tomorrow's a big-time weather day as well. 10%, large 10% hatched area. Goodness, it's been real. It's definitely been real with the severe weather out here this year, and no joke. Take these warnings and watches here, take them home and tell your family about them, because tomorrow, today, anytime they put out these warnings like this, it needs to be need to pay attention to it. Make sure you have your weather radio on and whatnot. Big time wind out there tomorrow as well in the 45% zone. sometimes, as we've seen down there in Houston, Texas a few days ago, those straight line winds that accompany the thunderstorms can do just as much damage as a tornado on a broad scale area. Some big time hail out there as well around Omaha and Lincoln. So just, stay weather aware here over these next couple days. Hopefully things aren't as dramatic as what they're painting a picture of on the severe weather map, but it's always good to have a plan. All right, folks, let's see what else we got. Wind out here in Northern California is blowing like crazy. Got a lot of static in the air. Super dry north wind coming in, heating us up. I don't know if you can hear the wind chimes in the back, but it's a windy one here in the Sacramento Valley. I have lived here the majority of my life. I've lived other areas across the country, but kind of, stuck here, Northern California. Eventually going to get out of here and probably head over to Kansas or Nebraska. Absolutely love that area. Yes, they have severe weather, but that's that's kind of my other hobby is the severe weather watching. But we got some decent dry wind out here. I don't really like it because obviously it dries everything up out here. Don't really have anything in the forecast here for the West Coast in terms of any wet weather, but it is our dry season. So this is expected, but it is drying out my voice a little bit. All right, folks. Little spike of an earthquake there on Mount St. Helens, it looks like, but really nothing big. Keep an eye on Southern California. I'm leaving up the earthquake watch because of all this activity we've seen here in the last 10 days with that migrational pattern up and about and very close. It's got to be putting strain out here against this area. It has to be. I mean, obviously there's some secondary branches here. I don't think this is going to turn into the new plate boundary at all. There's fault systems obviously here, but these branch off of the plate boundary and then actually extend back into it here up north. But this area here, the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault, has to be about ready to go. So keep an eye on that, and of course if anything does happen out here, we'll jump right on and get some updates going in there. In the meantime, enjoy your Monday. Stay weather aware out there if you're underneath the severe weather threat today. Take care and stay safe.